Millionaire cries for being broke until a poor girl saves $500 million with an act. When she finds out who the girl is, she freezes. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The autumn leaves crunched beneath Robert Harrison's Italian leather shoes as he stumbled through Central Park, his $3,000 suit wrinkled and stained with tears. Just 12 hours ago, he had been worth $847 million. Now he couldn't even afford a cup of coffee. The park bench felt cold against his back as he collapsed onto it, his hands trembling as he pulled out his phone. 23 missed calls from his lawyer, 15 from his accountant, and countless messages from reporters who had already caught wind of the Harrison Empire's spectacular collapse. How did it all go so wrong? He whispered to the empty park, his voice cracking like a broken man's should. The Ponzi scheme had been perfect, or so he thought. Marcus Webb, his most trusted business partner for 15 years, had vanished overnight with every penny, leaving Robert holding forged documents and worthless promises. The FBI had frozen all his accounts. His penthouse was being seized. His wife Sarah had already filed for divorce, taking their son Timothy with her. At 62 years old, Robert Harrison was utterly alone. A soft voice interrupted his despair. "Mister, why are you crying?" Robert looked up to see a little girl, no more than 7 years old, with golden blonde hair that caught the afternoon sunlight like spun silk. Her clothes were worn and patched, her sneakers held together with duct tape, but her blue eyes sparkled with genuine concern. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he managed, wiping his eyes. "Where are your parents?" "Mama's working 3 jobs today," she said matter-of-factly, settling beside him on the bench. "I'm Lucy Morrison. I live in the shelter on 42nd Street with Mama." The simplicity of her honesty cut through Robert's self-pity. Here was a child who had nothing, yet she radiated more warmth than anyone in his wealthy circles ever had. "I'm Robert," he said softly, "and I'm crying because I lost everything I thought mattered." Lucy tilted her head, studying him with the wisdom that only children possess. "Mama says when we lose things, sometimes we find better things. Maybe you just haven't found yours yet." Robert almost smiled despite his pain. "You're very wise for 7 years old." "Mama teaches me lots," Lucy said proudly. Then her expression grew serious. "Are you hungry? I know what hungry feels like." Before Robert could answer, Lucy reached into her small, tattered backpack and pulled out something that made his heart stop. It wasn't the sandwich he expected, or a few crumpled dollar bills. It was a pristine bank envelope, thick with what appeared to be official documents and a cashier's check visible through the transparent window. The amount made Robert's eyes widen in disbelief. $500,000. "Lucy," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "where did you get this?" The little girl looked at the envelope as if it were perfectly normal, then back at Robert with those impossibly innocent blue eyes. "A nice man in a black car gave it to me this morning. He said to give it to the sad man on the park bench who lost everything." She pressed the envelope into his shaking hands. "He said you'd know what to do with it." Robert's world tilted on its axis. Who was this child? How could a homeless 7-year-old be carrying $500 million? And why? His phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID made his blood run cold. Marcus Webb. Private number. As Robert stared at the phone, then at the impossible envelope, then at the mysterious little girl beside him, one terrifying question echoed through his mind. What if Lucy Morrison wasn't who she appeared to be? Robert's finger hovered over the phone screen as Marcus Webb's name pulsed with each ring. The autumn air seemed to grow colder with every passing second, and Lucy watched him with those impossibly curious blue eyes, seemingly unaware of the earthquake her simple act had triggered. "Answer it," she said softly, tilting her head in that peculiar way children do when they sense adult anxiety. "Maybe he wants to say sorry." The innocence in her voice made Robert's chest tighten. If only the world were that simple, where apologies could fix stolen fortunes and broken lives. With trembling hands that betrayed his fear, Robert swiped to accept the call. "Hello, Robert." Marcus's voice was eerily calm, as if he were calling about weekend golf plans instead of the financial devastation that had destroyed Robert's entire existence just hours earlier. "You son of a—" Robert started, his rage building like a storm, but Marcus cut him off with a low chuckle. "Before you say something you'll regret, old friend, look at what the little girl gave you. Really look at it. Every document, every detail. Don't just focus on the money." Robert's blood turned to ice, crystallizing in his veins. How could Marcus possibly know about Lucy? His eyes darted frantically around the park, searching for surveillance equipment, for watchers hidden behind trees, for any sign of how Marcus could be observing this impossible encounter. "That's right, Robert. I'm watching. I've been watching for weeks, months actually." Marcus's chuckle was cold as winter wind cutting through bare branches. "Do you really think this is all a coincidence? A homeless child just happens to have exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. You always were too trusting for your own good." Lucy tugged at Robert's expensive sleeve with her small, dirt-smudged fingers. "Who is that man? He sounds mean. His voice makes my tummy feel funny." Robert covered the phone's microphone with his palm, his wedding ring catching the fading sunlight. "Just a business associate, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." "Robert," Marcus continued, his voice now carrying an edge of anticipation that made Robert's skin crawl, "that envelope contains more than money, much more. Check the inside pocket. There's a hidden compartment. You'll find something very interesting about your little angel." With hands that shook like autumn leaves, Robert carefully opened the envelope. The cashier's check for $500 million was real. He could tell from the watermarks, the official seals, the weight of the paper. But as his fingers explored the envelope's interior, he found what Marcus was referring to, a small, hidden pocket sealed with barely visible tape. Inside was a photograph that made his heart stop completely. It was Lucy, but not the Lucy sitting beside him. This Lucy was wearing an expensive private school uniform, navy blazer with gold buttons, perfectly pressed white shirt, plaid skirt that cost more than most people made in a month. She was standing in front of a mansion that Robert recognized immediately, having attended countless dinner parties there over the years. It was the Webb family estate in the Hamptons, with its perfectly manicured gardens and imposing stone facade. "You're beginning to understand, aren't you?" Marcus whispered through the phone, his voice carrying a satisfaction that made Robert's stomach turn. "Lucy Morrison isn't quite who she appears to be, is she? In fact, Lucy Morrison doesn't exist at all." Robert looked at the child beside him, the worn clothes held together with patches and prayers, the sneakers bound with duct tape, the innocent eyes that sparkled with genuine concern for his well-being, then back at the photograph of what appeared to be the same girl living in a world of unimaginable luxury. "What do you want, Marcus?" Robert's voice was barely a whisper, carried away by the wind like dead leaves. "Meet me tonight. Pier 47, midnight. Come alone, and bring the girl. It's time you learned the truth about everything, including why I really took your money, why I destroyed your life, and why this little angel is the key to everything." The line went dead, with a finality that echoed through Robert's bones. Lucy was studying his face with those penetrating blue eyes that seemed far too knowing for a 7-year-old. "Mr. Robert, you look scared. Your face went all white like when Mama gets really sick. Did that man hurt you?" Oh, Robert stared at the photograph, then at Lucy, his mind reeling with impossible questions that seemed to multiply with each passing second. Who was this child really? What was her connection to Marcus? And what had he stumbled into by accepting her mysterious gift? As the sun set behind the New York skyline, painting the park in shades of gold and shadow, Robert realized that nothing, Absolutely nothing was as it seemed. "Lucy," Robert said carefully, kneeling to her eye level on the rough concrete beside the park bench. "Can you tell me more about your mama? What's her full name? Where did she work before you moved to the shelter?" The little girl's expression remained open and trusting, but Robert noticed something he had missed before, a slight hesitation, as if she were carefully choosing her words. "Elena Morrison," she replied without breaking eye contact. "She used to have a different job, a good job where she wore pretty clothes and drove a big truck. But then Daddy went away and everything changed, and we had to move to the shelter. Mama cries sometimes at night when she thinks I'm sleeping, but I always hear her." Robert studied her face for any sign of deception, searching for the telltale micro-expressions that usually betrayed a lie. But he found only the raw honesty that children possessed before the world taught them to hide their pain. Yet the photograph in his pocket seemed to burn against his chest like a brand. "What did your daddy do for work, sweetheart?" Lucy's expression darkened slightly, clouds passing over her sunny disposition. She looked down at her small hands, picking at a loose thread on her patched jeans. "Mama says he worked with bad men who took money from good people. She says that's why we can't go home anymore, why we have to hide. She says some of the people Daddy hurt are very angry and might want to hurt us too." A chill ran down Robert's spine like ice water. Could Eleanor Morrison be connected to Marcus somehow? The timeline was starting to make terrible sense. His business empire had been built on partnerships that, in hindsight, had always seemed too good to be true. Returns that were too consistent, explanations that were too vague, documentation that was always just slightly out of reach. "Lucy, the man who gave you this envelope this morning, can you describe him better? What exactly did he look like?" She closed her eyes, concentrating with the intense focus that children brought to important tasks. "He had grey hair like yours, but it was all slicked back with that shiny stuff. He had mean eyes, not mean like angry, but mean like he was planning something that would make other people sad. He wore a really nice suit, nicer than yours even, and he had a ring with a big blue stone that sparkled when he moved his hand." Robert's hand instinctively went to his left ring finger, to the platinum wedding band that Sarah had thrown back at him just this morning, with words that cut deeper than any knife. A sapphire ring. Marcus had worn one just like it for as long as Robert had known him. A symbol of their partnership, a matching set they'd bought together when their first major deal had made them both millionaires. Did he say anything else? Anything about me specifically, about why he chose you to deliver this? Lucy's eyes brightened with the memory. "He said you were going to help us find our real home again. He said you were the key to making everything right, to fixing all the broken things. He said you were a good man who had been tricked by bad people, but that you could make up for it if you were brave enough." Before Robert could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The words on the screen made his hands shake. "The shelter on 42nd Street has no record of Elena or Lucy Morrison. Neither do any other shelters in the 5 boroughs. The social services database shows no trace of them anywhere in New York State. Ask yourself, where did this child really come from? And more importantly, what does she really want?" Mem. Robert's hands began to shake as he looked at Lucy, who was now humming softly while swinging her legs from the bench, her worn sneakers barely touching the ground. Everything about her seemed genuine. The patched clothes that spoke of careful mending and making do, the innocent manner that couldn't possibly be faked, the genuine concern for his well-being that had drawn her to comfort a crying stranger. But if she wasn't who she claimed to be, then what was she? A pawn in Marcus's elaborate game of revenge? A victim of circumstances beyond her understanding, or something else entirely? "Lucy," he said gently, standing and extending his hand to her, "how would you like to get some hot chocolate? And maybe Maybe you could tell me more about this nice man who gave you the envelope, about what else he might have said. Then, as they stood to leave the bench, Robert noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the late afternoon sun, their shadows fell across the concrete path, his tall and broad, hers small and delicate. But as they began to walk, Lucy's shadow seemed wrong somehow, distorted in a way that didn't match her small frame. It was the shadow of a much older person, someone who carried the weight of adult secrets and adult pain. Robert's hands trembled as he dialed his old friend, Detective Patricia Walsh, from the 14th Precinct, stepping away from the hot chocolate stand where Lucy waited patiently, carefully counting the change from her small, worn purse. After 30 years of friendship that had survived career changes, divorces, and countless late-night conversations about life's disappointments, Patty was one of the few people who still answered his calls without hesitation. "Patty, I need a favor. A big one. No questions asked, at least not yet." "Robert." "Jesus Christ, I heard about what happened on the news. Channel 7 is calling it the biggest financial scandal since Madoff. Are you okay? Are you safe?" The genuine concern in her voice almost broke his composure. "I need you to run some names through the system. Elena Morrison and her daughter Lucy Morrison. They're supposedly living in the shelter on 42nd Street, but something doesn't feel right about their story." There was a pause, then the familiar sound of fingers flying across a keyboard. Patricia had always been thorough, meticulous in her investigations. "Give me a minute. Okay, I'm in the shelter database now." "Robert, there's no Elena Morrison in any of our shelter databases. No Lucy Morrison either. In fact, I'm running a broader search now. There's no record of anyone by those names in the entire New York social services system, going back 5 years. Robert's heart pounded as he watched Lucy through the coffee shop window. She was sitting patiently at their small table, carefully coloring on napkins with a broken crayon she'd found in her backpack, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. She looked like any other 7-year-old, lost in the simple joy of creating something beautiful from nothing. "Patty, can you run something else?" Cross-reference any missing children reports with this description. 7-year-old blonde girl, blue eyes, approximately 4 feet tall, unusually articulate for her age. More typing, faster now, with the urgency that came when a case started to reveal its hidden depths. Then silence that stretched too long, the kind of silence that preceded bad news. "Robert, there's something here, but it's impossible. It doesn't make sense." "What do you mean, impossible? Just tell me what you found." "There was a missing child report filed 18 months ago. Lucia Webb, age 7, blonde hair, blue eyes, daughter of Marcus and Victoria Webb. But Robert, this child was reportedly killed in a car accident in Fairfield County, Connecticut. Closed case, death certificate on file signed by the medical examiner. Case closed, family notified, funeral held." But the coffee shop seemed to spin around Robert, the familiar world tilting on its axis. Lucia Webb, Marcus's daughter, the apple of his eye, who had died in a tragic accident that had driven Victoria to a complete nervous breakdown, and Marcus to... What? This elaborate revenge scheme that had destroyed Robert's life. "Patty, are you absolutely sure about that death certificate? Could there have been a mistake, a mix-up? It's right here in the system, Robert. Medical examiner's report, dental records match, everything. But here's the thing that's making my head spin. There's something else." The accident report was filed by a single witness, the only person who stopped to help, a medical supply truck driver named Elena Morrison. Robert dropped the phone, his nerveless fingers unable to maintain their grip. The device clattered on the sidewalk, Patricia's voice calling his name becoming a distant buzz. Through the window, Lucy looked up from her coloring and waved at him, her smile bright and innocent and heartbreaking. But now Robert saw what he had missed before, what his grief and desperation had blinded him to, the slight upturn of her nose that was pure Webb family genetics, the particular shade of her blue eyes that matched Marcus's exactly, the way she tilted her head when she concentrated. A gesture he'd seen Marcus make 1,000 times during business meetings. She looked exactly like Marcus Webb. She moved like him, thought like him, even had his unconscious mannerisms. As Robert stumbled back toward the coffee shop, his mind raced with horrifying possibilities. If Lucy was somehow Lucia Webb, if she was Marcus's supposedly dead daughter, then what was this elaborate charade really about? What was the endgame of this impossible deception? And more terrifyingly, what was Marcus planning to do when they met tonight at Pier 47? Robert's phone, still lying on the sidewalk, buzzed with another text message. "You're beginning to see the truth, aren't you? The pieces are falling into place. Tonight you'll understand everything. But first, ask Lucy about the night it rained fire. Ask her about the accident that was no accident. Ask her what she remembers about her real mother's last words. M." As Robert picked up his phone with shaking hands, he realized that he was no longer dealing with a simple case of financial fraud. He was caught in something much darker, much more personal, and much more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "Lucy," Robert said carefully as he sat back down at their small coffee shop table, his voice as gentle as he could manage, despite the terror clawing at his chest. "Can you tell me about the night it rained fire?" The little girl's crayon stopped moving across the napkin mid-stroke. The cheerful yellow sun she'd been drawing left incomplete. Her entire body went rigid, every muscle tensing as if preparing for a blow, and for a moment her innocent expression flickered like a mask slipping, revealing something much older and more knowing underneath. I don't remember much about that night," she whispered, her voice suddenly hollow, empty of the warmth that had characterized her speech until now. "Mama says it's better if I don't remember. She says remembering too much about sad things can make your heart sick. But you do remember some things, don't you?" Robert pressed gently, leaning forward across the small table. "About the car? About the storm? About the man who was driving the truck?" Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the tears of a normal 7-year-old crying over a scraped knee or broken toy. They were the tears of someone who had seen too much, understood too much, carried burdens far too heavy for such small shoulders. "The truck driver was supposed to save us," she said so quietly. Robert had to lean forward to hear her over the coffee shop's ambient noise. "Mama, my real mama," she was crying and screaming at Daddy in the car. She had found papers in his office, papers that showed all the bad things he was doing to people like you. She said she was going to call the police, that she couldn't let him hurt any more families. Robert's heart hammered in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like gunshots. "What happened next, sweetheart?" "The Daddy was driving too fast because he was angry. The rain was so hard we couldn't see anything, and the lightning was making everything bright and scary. Mama kept yelling that he had to stop, that he had to turn himself in, that she wouldn't let him destroy any more lives." Lucy's voice trailed off as she stared at her small hands, still gripping the broken crayon. "Then Mama grabbed the wheel and tried to turn us around, back toward the police station. But Daddy fought her and—" She looked up at Robert with eyes that held far too much knowledge for her age. There was fire, so much fire. The car was upside down, and Mama wasn't moving, and Daddy was screaming my name. But then the truck driver, she was there. She broke the window and pulled me out. She said her name was Elena and that she was going to take care of me now. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Elena Morrison wasn't Lucy's mother. She was the truck driver who had saved Marcus Webb's daughter from a car crash that had supposedly killed her. But why the elaborate deception? Why let the world think Lucia was dead? "Lucy, what's your real name?" For a long moment, the child said nothing, her internal struggle playing out across her young features. When she finally spoke, it was in a voice that was suddenly much older than her 7 years, carrying a weight of sadness that broke Robert's heart. "My real name is Lucia Webb, but Daddy told Elena to call me Lucy Morrison and to hide me until it was time for his plan. He said the bad men who trusted him with their money would try to hurt me if they knew I was alive. He said I had to pretend to be someone else until he could fix everything he broke." Robert's blood turned to ice, flowing sluggishly through his veins. "What plan, Lucy? What did your father tell you about his plan?" "Daddy said he had to punish the bad men who trusted him with their money. He said he had to take everything from them, just like they would have taken everything from families like mine if they had found out what he was really doing." Her blue eyes, so much like Marcus's, bore into his soul with an intensity that was deeply unsettling. "He said you were the worst one, Mr. Robert. He said you knew what he was doing, but you let him do it anyway because it made you rich. He said you didn't care about the people who would get hurt." Robert's mind reeled as suppressed memories began surfacing. Had he known? Had he willfully ignored the signs that Marcus's investment strategies were too good to be true? The quarterly reports that never quite added up, the client meetings that Marcus always handled alone, the explanations that were always just vague enough to avoid real scrutiny. "He's been planning this for 18 months, Lucy continued in that eerily mature voice that didn't belong in a child's mouth. "Ever since the accident. Elena's been taking care of me, but she's very sick now. The medicine costs lots of money that Daddy won't give her. He says tonight is when everything gets fixed, when all the bad people get what they deserve." "What happens tonight, Lucy? What is your father planning to do?" The little girl looked at him with eyes that held knowledge no child should possess, eyes that had seen the darkest corners of adult betrayal and manipulation. "Tonight," Daddy says, "you're going to give him something much more valuable than money. Something that will make sure he never has to worry about anything ever again. And then Elena and I can finally stop hiding and go home." As Robert stared at this child who was somehow both innocent victim and unwitting accomplice, he realized with growing horror that he still had no idea what Marcus really wanted from him. But he was certain that when he found out, nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 6. The Elena Connection. Robert's phone rang as they left the coffee shop, the cool evening air carrying the scent of autumn leaves and approaching rain. Elena Morrison, a name that now carried sinister weight and hidden meanings, appeared on the ID, along with a photo and a tired Mr. Harrison. The voice was weak, strained by illness and exhaustion, but unmistakably desperate. "I need to see you. Right now, before tonight, before Marcus gets what he's been planning for, before it's too late for all of us." "Where are you?" Robert asked, instinctively moving closer to Lucy, who was walking beside him with that peculiar adult composure that seemed so wrong in a 7-year-old. "Mercy General Hospital, room 347 in the oncology ward. And Mr. Harrison, bring Lucia, please." It's time she knew the whole truth about what her father really is, about what he's planning to do to both of you tonight. The drive to the hospital passed in heavy silence, the city lights blurring past the windows like falling stars. Lucia, sat beside him in the passenger seat, her small hands folded in her lap, staring out at the night with an expression far too mature for her age. Every few minutes she would glance at him with those penetrating blue eyes, as if she were studying him, measuring him against some internal standard he couldn't fathom. "Are you scared, Mr. Robert?" she asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Yes," he admitted, seeing no point in lying to someone who seemed to see through every adult deception. "I'm very scared. Are you?" "I've been scared for a long time," she replied simply, "ever since the fire. Ever since Mama died and Daddy started being different." Mercy General Hospital loomed before them like a fortress of glass and steel, its windows glowing with the harsh fluorescent light that spoke of human suffering and medical miracles in equal measure. Elena Morrison was dying. That much was obvious the moment Robert saw her in the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped ominously in the sterile room, their electronic rhythms marking time like a countdown to an inevitable end. But her eyes, sharp and intelligent despite her physical weakness, tracked their movement as they entered, and Robert could see the fierce, protective love she felt for the child beside him. "Lucia, baby," Elena whispered, extending a trembling hand toward the little girl, IV tubes snaking from her arm like transparent vines. "Come here, sweetheart. We need to talk." As Lucy approached the bed, Robert noticed something that made his stomach lurch with a new kind of horror. The woman's face, though ravaged by illness and chemotherapy, bore a striking resemblance to his own wife, Sarah. The same bone structure, the same gentle eyes, the same way of holding her mouth when she was thinking deeply about something painful. "Mr. Harrison," Eleanor said, her voice barely audible above the steady hum of medical equipment. 18 months ago, I was driving a medical supply truck through Connecticut during that terrible storm. I wasn't supposed to be on that back road. I was running late from visiting my sister in Hartford, trying to make up time before my shift ended. Robert moved closer to the bed, sensing that every word might be crucial to understanding this nightmare he'd stumbled into. The Webb car came out of nowhere, speeding through the rain like something was chasing it. I could see them through the windows. Victoria Webb was screaming at Marcus about money he'd stolen, about families he'd destroyed with his lies. She had a briefcase full of documents, evidence she'd gathered about his crimes. She was trying to force him to turn around, to go to the police station and confess everything. Elena's eyes closed as she relived that terrible night, her breathing becoming more labored with the effort of speaking. "What happened next?" Robert asked gently. Victoria grabbed the wheel when Marcus refused to turn around. The car spun out, flipped 3 times, and caught fire almost immediately. I pulled over and ran to help, but Victoria, she was already gone, Mr. Harrison, already dead when I reached her. But she was conscious for just a moment, long enough to grab my hand and whisper something I'll never forget. Lucy's small hand gripped Elena's tighter, her knuckles white with tension. "Tell him what Mama said, Elena." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Robert. Victoria Webb's last words were, "Don't let Marcus hurt any more children. Promise me you'll protect my baby from what he's become." The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through tubes. "But that's not the worst part," Elena continued, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "Marcus wasn't unconscious like I thought. He was awake, lucid, and the first thing he said to me wasn't 'thank you for saving my daughter' or 'please help my wife.' It was, 'how much will it cost to make this disappear?'" Robert felt the world shifting beneath his feet. "What do you mean?" "Marcus offered me $2 million to take Lucia and disappear. To let the world think she died in the crash with her mother. He said he needed time to finish some business, to tie up loose ends. He said if I took care of her for 2 years, he'd give me enough money to get the cancer treatment I needed and to start a new life somewhere safe." Elena turned to Lucy with infinite sadness. "But the cancer got worse faster than anyone expected. And Marcus never intended to pay me. He's been using Lucia as leverage, training her to play a role in his revenge against the people he blames for his wife's death." Robert's heart pounded as the full scope of Marcus's manipulation became clear. "He blames me for Victoria's death. He says you and the other investors pushed him to take bigger risks, to promise higher returns to more clients. He says Victoria found out about the Ponzi scheme and confronted him because she was terrified of what would happen to Lucia when it all collapsed. In his twisted mind, you're responsible for every terrible thing that followed. Elena struggled to sit up straighter, her eyes blazing with desperate urgency. But there's something else, Mr. Harrison. Something Lucia doesn't know yet. She looked at the little girl with heartbreaking tenderness. Lucia, honey, what your father told you about Mr. Harrison isn't true. Mr. Harrison was just as much a victim as everyone else. Your father has been lying to you about everything. Lucy looked between Elena and Robert, confusion and pain warring in her young face. But Daddy said Mr. Robert knew about the bad things. He said Mr. Robert helped him steal the money. Your daddy is very sick in his heart, Eleanor whispered, reaching out to stroke the child's blonde hair. The accident changed him, made him angry and desperate, and tonight he's planning to do something terrible, something that will hurt you most of all. What? Robert demanded, fear making his voice sharp. What is he planning? Elena's grip on Lucy's hand tightened as she looked directly into Robert's eyes with the intensity of someone delivering a final warning. He's going to tell the world that Lucia Webb is alive. He's going to return her publicly to claim his redemption story, the grieving father who saved his daughter and exposed the criminal conspiracy that killed his wife. The media will eat it up, and Marcus will become a hero instead of the villain he really is. Elena's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. But first, he has to make sure there are no witnesses who can contradict his version of events, no one who knows the truth about how he really stole that money, about how he manipulated his own daughter's disappearance. Robert felt the blood drain from his face as understanding crashed over him like a wave. You mean he's going to kill you, Mr. Harrison, tonight at Pier 47, and he's going to make Lucia watch, telling her it's justice for her mother's death. Then he'll use her trauma and her testimony to seal his transformation from criminal to hero. The machines around Elena's bed seemed to beep faster, matching the terrified rhythm of Robert's heart as he realized that he was walking into a trap that had been 18 months in the making. As they left the hospital, Robert's phone buzzed with a series of text messages from unknown numbers. Each message contained a single photograph and a brief, terrifying caption. David Chen, 34, father of 2, lost his children's college funds. Suicide 6 months ago. Margaret Williams, 67, retired teacher, lost her pension, homeless since March. The Patterson family, 3 generations of savings gone, currently living in their car. Lucy stared at the photos over his shoulder, her small face growing pale in the harsh glow of the phone screen. Are these the people Daddy hurt? Some of them, Robert whispered, scrolling through dozens more images. Each one showed a face, a life destroyed by Marcus Webb's elaborate deception. But these weren't just random victims. They were all people Robert had personally recommended to Marcus's investment firm. The final message made his blood freeze. Your wife Sarah and son Timothy are safe, for now, but they won't be if you don't come to Pier 47 alone tonight. No police, no FBI, no tricks, just you, the girl, and the truth. He has my family, Robert breathed, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped the phone. Lucy's small hand found his, her fingers surprisingly strong for someone so young. Elena told me something else while you were parking the car, she said quietly. She said Daddy doesn't just want to hurt you. He wants to hurt everyone who ever trusted him, everyone who made him feel like he had to lie. They sat in Robert's car in the hospital parking lot, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on them like a physical force. Around them, the city continued its nightly rhythm, people going home to families, to safety, to lives that made sense. Lucy, I need you to understand something, Robert said, turning to face the child who had become the center of this nightmare. Your father isn't the man you remember. The accident, losing your mother, the pressure of keeping his crime secret, it changed him into someone dangerous. I know, she replied with devastating simplicity. "I've known for a long time. The daddy who used to read me bedtime stories and teach me to ride my bike. He died in that car crash too. The man who's been planning this, who's been using Elena and me like pieces on a chessboard, that's someone else wearing daddy's face." Robert's heart broke for this child who had been forced to grow up far too quickly, who understood adult betrayal and manipulation in ways no 7-year-old should. "What do you want to do, Lucy? This is your choice. We could run, take Elena, and disappear somewhere Marcus can't find us." Lucy was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights that twinkled like fallen stars. When she spoke, her voice carried a determination that belonged to someone much older. "No. Elena is dying, and she needs to see this end. The families in those pictures deserve justice. And maybe if I talk to Daddy, if I remind him who he used to be, he'll remember that he's supposed to protect people, not hurt them." As they drove through the darkening streets toward Pier 47, Robert realized that he was no longer trying to save just himself. He was trying to save a little girl who had already lost everything, but still believed in the possibility of redemption. Behind them, neither noticed the black sedan that had been following them since they left the hospital. The Hudson River stretched before them like a dark mirror, reflecting the city lights in shimmering patterns that danced with each gentle wave. Pier 47 jutted into the water like an accusing finger, its weathered wooden planks creaking ominously under the weight of approaching footsteps. Robert held Lucy's hand as they walked toward the end of the pier, where a solitary figure waited in the shadows. Even from a distance, Marcus Webb's silhouette was unmistakable. The same confident posture, the same expensive overcoat, the same way of standing that had once commanded respect in boardrooms across the city. "Hello, Robert," Marcus called out as they approached, his voice carrying easily across the water. "Thank you for coming, and thank you for bringing my daughter home." Up close, Marcus looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, and his formerly perfect hair had gone completely gray. But his smile was the same charming expression that had convinced hundreds of people to trust him with their life savings. "Daddy." Lucy's voice was small, uncertain, as she looked at the man who had once been her hero. "Hello, Princess," Marcus said, kneeling to her level. "I've missed you so much. Are you ready to come home? Are you ready to help Daddy fix everything that's been broken?" Robert stepped protectively in front of Lucy. "Let my family go, Marcus. Sarah and Timothy have nothing to do with this." Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, but they have everything to do with this. You see, Robert, I've spent 18 months studying you, learning about every person you care about, every weakness you have. Your wife thinks you're a monster now. She's seen the news reports, the FBI raids, the frozen accounts. She believes you knew about my crimes all along, because you made sure she would believe that. Did I? Or did I simply reveal the truth you were too cowardly to admit?" Marcus's eyes glittered with malice. "You knew, Robert. Maybe not the specifics, but you knew something was wrong. The returns were too good. The documentation was too sparse. The client meetings were too secretive. But you didn't ask questions because the money was too good to question." Lucy pulled on Robert's coat. "Is that true, Mr. Robert? Did you know Daddy was stealing?" The question hung in the salt air like an accusation. Robert looked down at this child who had become his unlikely ally, this little girl who deserved honesty even in the middle of a nightmare. "I suspected something," he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "Not the full truth, not the extent of it, but yes. I had doubts that I should have pursued. I should have asked harder questions. I should have protected people like your mother." Marcus clapped slowly, mockingly. "Bravo, Robert. Honesty at last. Now Lucy can see you for what you really are, a man who values money more than morality." But Lucy surprised them both. Instead of recoiling from Robert, she stepped closer to him, her small hand finding his. "At least he told the truth," she said to her father. "When did you stop telling the truth, Daddy?" Marcus's face darkened like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "When the world forced me to choose between protecting my family and playing by rules that were designed to keep people like us from ever really winning." A new voice cut through the tension. "That's not what happened, Marcus, and you know it." They turned to see Eleanor Morrison walking slowly down the pier, supported by a hospital wheelchair that she was pushing like a walker. Behind her, several figures emerged from the shadows. FBI agents, their badges gleaming in the moonlight. "Elena," Marcus snarled, his charming mask finally slipping completely. "You were supposed to be dying." "I am dying," Elena replied calmly. "But not before I tell everyone the truth about what really happened that night in Connecticut." The truth," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across the water despite her physical weakness, "is that Marcus Webb didn't start stealing money to protect his family. He started stealing money because he was addicted to the lifestyle it provided. The cars, the houses, the respect from people who thought he was a financial genius." Marcus's face contorted with rage. "You don't know anything about the pressure I was under, the expectations." "I know everything," Eleanor interrupted, pulling a small recording device from her coat pocket, "including what really happened the night Victoria died." The FBI agents moved closer, forming a loose circle around the group. Robert noticed that their leader, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, was keeping her eyes fixed on Marcus rather than him. "Play it," Marcus said with deadly calm. "Let's hear what lies a dying woman thinks she can tell." Elena pressed play. Victoria Webb's voice emerged from the small speaker, tinny but unmistakably desperate. "Elena, if you're hearing this, it means Marcus found out about the recording I made. I hid copies of everything, the financial records, the client lists, the evidence of how he moved the money. I tried to confront him tonight, to make him turn himself in before more families got hurt." The recording crackled with static, then continued. "Marcus isn't the man I married. The stealing started small, just skimming a little from accounts that wouldn't notice, but then it became like a drug. He couldn't stop. And when I found out, he was using our daughter's college friends' parents as targets, using Lucia's playdates to scope out new victims. I knew I had to act." Lucy's small hand gripped Robert's tighter as her mother's voice filled the night air. "Robert Harrison isn't the villain Marcus made him out to be. Robert was asking questions, getting suspicious. That's why Marcus accelerated his timeline. He knew Robert was going to expose him, so he decided to frame Robert as his co-conspirator instead." Marcus lunged for the recording device, but the FBI agents were faster. As they restrained him, his composure finally cracked completely. "She was going to destroy everything," he screamed. "Everything I built, everything I worked for. She was going to take Lucia away from me, turn her against me." "So you killed her," Elena said simply. "It was an accident. I never meant. I just wanted her to stop, to listen to reason." The FBI agent in charge stepped forward. "Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and now, in light of this evidence, for the murder of Victoria Webb." As the handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists, he looked at his daughter with eyes that were both pleading and desperate. "Lucia, princess, you have to understand. Everything I did was for you, to protect you, to make sure you'd never want for anything." Lucy walked slowly toward her father, this man who had manipulated and lied and killed, who had used her own supposed death as a weapon against innocent people. When she reached him, she stood on her tiptoes and whispered something in his ear that only he could hear. Marcus's face crumpled, and for the first time since Robert had known him, he began to cry. As the FBI agents led Marcus away, Eleanor collapsed into her wheelchair, the adrenaline that had kept her standing finally deserting her. "What did you tell him?" Robert asked Lucy gently. The little girl looked older than her 7 years as she watched her father disappear into the back of a police car. I told him that Mama would have forgiven him if he'd just asked. But now it's too late. There's something else, Eleanor said weakly as the police cars pulled away with their prisoner. Something I haven't told you yet. About why Marcus really chose you, Robert. The FBI agent in charge, who had introduced herself as Special Agent Rebecca Torres, helped Eleanor back into her wheelchair. Mrs. Morrison has been cooperating with our investigation for the past 6 months, Torres explained, ever since she contacted us about Marcus's plan. Robert's mind reeled. 6 months, but you were supposed to be hiding from him. Eleanor's smile was sad but knowing. I was never hiding from Marcus, Mr. Harrison. I was hiding from you. I don't understand. Tell him, Lucy said quietly. Tell him about the real reason Mama died. Elena took a shuddering breath, the effort of speaking clearly taking its toll on her failing body. Victoria Webb didn't just discover that Marcus was running a Ponzi scheme, she discovered that he had a partner, someone who was helping him identify targets, someone who provided legitimacy to his operation. Robert felt the pier sway beneath his feet, though he knew it was his own equilibrium failing him. You're saying I was his partner. Not knowingly, Torres interjected, but your endorsement carried weight. When Robert Harrison recommended an investment opportunity to his friends and colleagues, they listened. Marcus used those recommendations to build his client base. But that's not the worst part, Elena continued. Victoria found out that Marcus was planning to frame you as his knowing accomplice. He had been forging documents, creating false communications, building a paper trail that would make it look like you were in on the scheme from the beginning. Robert sank onto a nearby bench, the weight of revelation crushing him. So when Victoria confronted him, she wasn't just trying to save the victims, Lucy said in her small, clear voice. She was trying to save you too, Mr. Robert. Mama found out that Daddy was going to let you take the blame for everything while he disappeared with all the money. Elena nodded weakly. Victoria had already contacted the FBI. She was going to turn in evidence that would have cleared you and exposed Marcus as the sole perpetrator. But Marcus found out about her plan. So he killed her, Torres said grimly, made it look like an accident, then proceeded with his original plan to frame you. Except now he had an even better story, the grieving widower whose business partner had betrayed his trust and caused his wife's death. Robert looked at Lucy, this remarkable child who had been through more trauma than most adults could survive. How long have you known? Since Elena got really sick and started telling me the truth about everything, Lucy replied. She said I needed to know who the good people and bad people really were, in case something happened to her. Agent Torres crouched down to Lucy's level. You've been very brave, Lucia. Your testimony is going to help us make sure your father can never hurt anyone else. But Lucy was shaking her head. That's not enough. The family's daddy hurt, they still don't have their money back. And Mr. Robert is still going to lose everything, even though he didn't really do anything wrong. Elena reached into her wheelchair's side pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. That's where this comes in. Robert recognized the envelope immediately. It was the same one Lucy had given him in the park, minus the cashier's check for $500 million. Marcus thought he was so clever, Elena said with a bitter laugh. He gave me that check to give to you, thinking it would implicate you further in his scheme. But what he didn't know is that I made copies of everything, every document, every financial record, every piece of evidence that shows exactly where all the stolen money is hidden. Torres took the envelope, her eyes widening as she reviewed its contents. Swiss accounts, offshore trusts, cryptocurrency wallets, this is everything. We can recover almost all of the stolen funds. Which means, Elena said, looking directly at Robert, that you can make things right. You can return the money to the families Marcus destroyed. You can be the hero of this story instead of the victim." As the truth settled around them like the cold river mist, Robert realized that Marcus's elaborate revenge plot had failed in the most ironic way possible. By trying to destroy Robert's reputation, Marcus had inadvertently given him the tools to restore it. But as he looked at Lucy, brave, traumatized, impossibly wise Lucy, he knew that the real victory wasn't about money or reputation. It was about a little girl who would finally be safe. 3 hours later, they sat in the FBI field office as dawn painted the New York skyline in shades of gold and promise. Lucy had fallen asleep in Robert's arms, exhausted by the emotional weight of confronting her father and finally learning the complete truth about her mother's death. Elena was being treated by paramedics, her condition stable but clearly deteriorating. The effort of bringing down Marcus had cost her precious energy she couldn't afford to lose. Agent Torres approached Robert with a stack of documents. "The forensic accounting team has been working through the night. We can trace and recover approximately 94% of the stolen funds. That's nearly $800 million that can be returned to victims." Robert looked down at Lucy's sleeping face, so peaceful despite everything she'd endured. "What happens to her now?" "That's complicated," Torres admitted. "Technically, she has no legal guardian. Marcus will likely spend the rest of his life in prison, and Eleanor." She glanced toward the medical area, where paramedics were monitoring the woman who had sacrificed everything to protect a child who wasn't even her own. "I want to adopt her," Robert said suddenly, the words surprising even him. "I know it sounds crazy, and I know my life is a mess right now, but it's not crazy," Elena called weakly from her stretcher. "Victoria would have wanted that. She always said you were one of the good ones, Robert. Even when Marcus was poisoning her mind against you, she knew you had a good heart." Lucy stirred in Robert's arms, her blue eyes opening slowly. "Did Daddy really try to blame you for what he did?" "Yes, sweetheart. But it doesn't matter now. What matters is making sure all the families he hurt get their money back." "And then what happens?" Robert was quiet for a moment, thinking about his own family, Sarah, who had filed for divorce based on lies Marcus had fed her, Timothy, his son, who now believed his father was a criminal. Rebuilding those relationships would take time, patience, and a kind of honesty he hadn't practiced in years. "Then we tell the truth," he said finally. "All of it. We make sure everyone knows what really happened, and we try to help everyone heal." Eleanor beckoned them closer to her stretcher. "There's one more thing," she whispered. "Marcus's plan had one more component. He didn't just want to frame you and recover his daughter. He wanted to disappear completely, start over somewhere new with a clean identity." She pressed a small key into Robert's hand. "Storage Unit 247 on the west side. Everything he stole, everyone he hurt, everyone he planned to become. It's all there. Consider it insurance in case he tries to appeal his conviction or claim he was coerced." As the sun rose over Manhattan, Robert realized that Marcus Webb's elaborate revenge plot had accomplished something the architect himself had never intended. It had forced Robert to confront his own moral compromises, to choose between self-preservation and doing what was right. "Elena," Lucy said softly, "are you going to be okay?" The woman's smile was filled with infinite tenderness. "I'm going to be fine, baby. I got to see justice done. I got to see you safe, and I got to keep the promise I made to your mama. That's enough for anyone." Agent Torres approached with final paperwork. "Mr. Harrison, we're going to need you to testify in Marcus's trial. Your cooperation, combined with Elena's evidence and Lucia's testimony, should put him away for life." As they prepared to leave the FBI office, Lucy tugged on Robert's sleeve. "Mr. Robert, do you think the families will forgive us, even though Daddy hurt them so much?" Robert knelt to her level, looking into those remarkable blue eyes that had seen far too much pain for someone so young. "I think," he said carefully. That forgiveness is something we'll have to earn. But I also think that's exactly what we're going to do. As they walked out into the morning light hand in hand, Robert knew that the hardest part wasn't over. Rebuilding trust, repairing relationships, and helping a traumatized child heal would take years of patience and dedication. But for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Behind them, Eleanor Morrison watched through the window as the man and child she had risked everything to protect walked toward their uncertain but promising future. Her promise to Victoria Webb was finally complete. 6 months later, Robert stood in the living room of his modest apartment on the Upper West Side, watching Lucy practice piano on the old upright he'd bought from a church sale. The melody she played was hauntingly beautiful, a piece Victoria Webb had composed years ago, before Marcus's lies had consumed their family. The doorbell rang, and Robert opened it to find Agent Torres holding a thick manila envelope and wearing an expression he couldn't quite read. "Rebecca," he said, stepping aside to let her in, "is everything okay? Has something happened with Marcus's appeal?" "No, the appeal was denied. Marcus will spend the rest of his life in prison." Torres looked at Lucy, who had stopped playing and was watching them with those impossibly perceptive blue eyes. "But there's something else. Something Elena wanted you to know before she passed away last week." Robert's heart clenched. Elena had been declining rapidly, but she'd insisted on staying alive long enough to see Lucy settled into her new life. They'd visited her every day, bringing flowers and stories about Lucy's progress in school, her new friends, her slow but steady healing from the trauma. "What is it?" Lucy asked, climbing down from the piano bench. Torres sat on the worn couch, her official demeanor softening as she looked at the child who had become the heart of this extraordinary story. "Elena left you both a letter, and a revelation that changes everything we thought we knew about this case." She handed Robert an envelope marked with Eleanor's careful handwriting, "For Robert and Lucy, the truth about Victoria's last gift." With trembling hands, Robert opened the letter and began to read aloud. "My dearest Robert and Lucy, if you're reading this, then I've finally joined Victoria in whatever comes after this life. But before I go, there's one final truth you need to know. I wasn't just a truck driver who happened to be on that road the night Victoria died. I was Victoria's half-sister. 25 years ago, our father had an affair that produced me. Victoria never knew I existed until she hired a private investigator to look into Marcus's business dealings. The investigator found me working as a medical supply driver, struggling to pay for cancer treatment I couldn't afford. Victoria reached out to me 3 weeks before she died. She knew Marcus was becoming dangerous, knew he was planning something terrible. She asked me to promise that if anything happened to her, I would protect Lucy and help expose the truth about Marcus's crimes. The envelope Lucy gave you in the park, Victoria prepared that months before her death. She had copies of all of Marcus's financial records, all the evidence needed to recover the stolen money. She hid it with me because she knew Marcus would never suspect a truck driver he'd never met. But here's what neither of you know. Victoria also left something else, something that will ensure Lucy never wants for anything again. In the storage unit Elena mentioned, there's a safe deposit box key, Box 1247 at Manhattan Trust. Inside that box is a trust fund Victoria established using money she had saved and hidden from Marcus over the years. $12 million, earning interest for the past 18 months. It's Lucy's inheritance from a mother who loved her enough to sacrifice everything to keep her safe. Robert's voice broke as he finished reading. Lucy stood perfectly still, tears streaming down her face, processing the magnitude of what her mother had done to protect her. "There's more," Torres said gently, handing them another document. "The trust fund comes with conditions. Lucy can access it for education, medical care, and basic needs. But the bulk of it becomes available only when she turns 21, or if she chooses to use it to help other families who've been victims of financial crimes. Lucy looked up at Robert with eyes that seemed far older than her 8 years. Mama knew, didn't she? She knew Daddy was going to try to hurt you and all those other people. She knew, Robert confirmed, pulling her into a hug, and she made sure we'd have everything we needed to make it right. The apartment fell quiet, except for the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. Finally, Lucy spoke again. I want to use the money to help the families Daddy hurt. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Mama would want that. Torres smiled, the first genuine smile Robert had seen from her in all their months of working together. I think that can be arranged. In fact, there's a foundation being established for exactly that purpose. The Victoria Webb Foundation for Financial Crime Victims. 3 hours later, after Torres had left and Lucy had gone to bed, Robert sat at his kitchen table writing a letter to his ex-wife Sarah. It was the 15th draft, but finally he thought he had found the right words. Dear Sarah, I know you may never forgive me for the choices I made, for the willful blindness that allowed me to profit from Marcus's crimes. I can't undo the damage to our marriage or the pain I've caused you and Timothy. But I want you to know that I understand now what it means to put family first, to choose love over money, to protect the innocent even when it costs everything. Lucy has taught me that redemption isn't about grand gestures or public vindication. It's about small daily choices to do better, to be better, to choose hope over despair. I'm not asking for forgiveness. That's something that can't be demanded, only earned. But I am asking for the chance to show you and Timothy who I'm trying to become. The man you married is still here, Sarah. He was just lost for a while in a world that convinced him winning mattered more than loving. I hope someday you'll let me prove that to you. All my love, Robert. As he sealed the letter, Lucy appeared in the doorway wearing the pajamas he'd bought her last month, the first new clothes she'd owned in over a year. Can't sleep, sweetheart? I was thinking about Mama and Elena, she said, climbing into the chair beside him. Do you think they're together now? Do you think they're proud of what we did? Robert looked at this remarkable child who had somehow survived her father's manipulation, her mother's death, and 18 months of uncertainty, emerging with her capacity for love and forgiveness intact. I think, he said carefully, that love like theirs doesn't just disappear when someone dies. I think it becomes part of the people left behind, helping them make better choices, teaching them to be braver and kinder than they thought possible. Lucy nodded solemnly. Elena said something like that, She said Mama's love was in every decision she made to protect me, and now it's in every decision we make to help other people. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle beyond their window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Lucy's therapy appointment, meetings with the foundation lawyers, the ongoing process of helping families rebuild their lives. But tonight, in this small apartment that had become a sanctuary, a middle-aged man and an 8-year-old girl who had found each other in the wreckage of betrayal were building something neither had expected to find again. A family founded not on blood or legal documents, but on the choice to love someone enough to stay, to fight, to hope. Good night, Daddy Robert, Lucy whispered as he tucked her into bed. Good night, sweetheart, he whispered back, his heart full of a peace he hadn't felt in years. Outside, the city never slept. But inside their home, two souls who had learned that the most valuable fortune wasn't measured in dollars, but in the daily decision to choose love over fear, hope over despair, and family over everything else that seemed to matter. In the end, Marcus Webb's elaborate revenge had accomplished something he never intended. It had revealed that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't money or manipulation or even justice. It was love, unconditional, sacrificial, redemptive love that could transform victims into heroes and strangers into family. And that was worth more than any fortune ever stolen or recovered.